Good evening, everyone. The Ranter is back for yet another one of his rambling diatribes on the politics of the day. And since the politics of the day is impeachment, I think we should continue with that. Now, the last day or so, I've been growing more and more annoyed and irritated upon this process. And it's not because it's leading to the inevitable verdict, because for me, I knew what the verdict was going to be before we even got into the House. At this point, the verdict is not even the point. I knew pragmatically, way back when, and you can see this in my previous videos, that I kind of opposed impeachment because we were too close to the election. And there were too many unknowable factors as what would happen. Like, it goes through impeachment process, and it goes to the Senate, and the Senate kills it. That, the inevitable victory lap would happen, and Democrats would be demoralized, and maybe that would lead to some stigma and so forth, negative stuff for the Democrat side on this. And Trump would run on it that, hey, they tried to take me down, but I won. Yay. All that shit. And pragmatically, you need 2/3 of the Senate to remove a president. That was never going to happen. For all the things this person has done morally, through his policies, through his rambling rhetoric, to the recklessness of his words that inspires weak-minded people to commit violence in the name of making America great again. Is he deserving of impeachment? You goddamn right he is. But because someone deserves something doesn't mean they get it. And there's another reason why I opposed impeachment in the abstracts is, for me, it is better that he gets beaten in the election than he is to be removed, especially being removed in a first term. This would have been a different conversation if this impeachment happened and after he had gotten a second term. If, let's say, for the sake of argument, that he did win the second term in this election, but there was enough momentum on the Democrat side that they take back the Senate, then we have a different ballgame. And then it seems less desperate to impeach him for the acts that he's done, when you no longer have an election in front of you where he could be beaten, and it doesn't appear like you're trying to say that, well, he can't be beaten, so we have to remove him. No. I've always maintained that this election is the Democrats to lose. Donald Trump is not going to do anything magical here to garner support for himself to win it. It is up to the Democrats to fall, to trip, to engage in disunity and infighting, which they're doing right now. Trump thanks you, by the way. And then they'll lose. And then he wins. Because you're too busy worrying about, what the DNC is doing to Bernie, or how socialist Bernie is, and what is Elizabeth Warren doing, and Biden, who is in decline, or any of that. See, we don't even know, because there's so many of these articles on social media, how many of these news sites are getting their stories, righteously, or we're once again dealing with bots that we did last time around, that throw out stories for people to share and reshare and reshare and debate over and mull over, and then have it stuck in their heads, and so when they go to the voting booth, such and such hates black people. Shit like that. So, with that being the background, that the verdict of his acquittal, which could literally come tomorrow, that doesn't bother me. What bothers me, and it's ironic to say this, because the Republicans bitched and moaned and whined about process through the House. The irony is, the process in the Senate is pissing me off. One thing I was kind of assuming, and silly me for assuming this, but I was assuming that the Republicans should have enough self-preservation for their own careers and their own individual campaigns, that they would want a fair trial, that they would want evidence to be shown, that they would want testimony, so that when they do their verdict of acquittal, they will at least would have shown the appearance of we listened to all the evidence, we weigh the pros and cons, we listened to the testimonies, and you know what? We just could not see it, so we voted to acquit. You know, that would go a long way to maintaining the trust, not only for your own voting bloc, but, you know, get people thinking on the other side that, yeah, maybe they were overreaching, or maybe the Democrats were doing something improper, or that this whole thing was improper. You know, if you have that sort of civil middle ground of, all right, you got us here, and we're going to do this, and we're going to listen to everyone, we're going to cross-examine, and we'll go from there. But that's not happening here. That's not. We have right now all likelihood that there will not be enough Republican defectors to garner enough support for the Democrats to get witnesses. There has not been an impeachment in our country's history for president or any other government official that impeachment is the function of their removal. That did not go without witnesses or new evidence. I said this in the last video, that on the first day of Andrew Johnson's Senate impeachment, new evidence was produced. There's never been a White House that has so flagrantly resisted and denied handing over documentation to impeachment. President Nixon tried doing that because he wanted to withhold his tapes, and the Supreme Court slapped him down, making a precedent that executive privilege weighed against the probative value of material that could lead to being evidence of misconduct, I'm paraphrasing, is not valid. It has to be shown. President Clinton, who admitted to perjury, he fessed up to it for lying for an extramarital affair under oath. Gave over 90,000 documents to his own impeachment. Donald Trump has not given up one piece of documentation. Donald Trump has compelled people not to testify. Those people who have testified in defiance of the White House. And have been excoriated, or whatever that word is, has been demonized, obviously through his Twitter, because President Pouty Manchild has to do that. And his social media wing at Fox News did all they can to demonize him. His allies in the Senate do so as well. Marsha Blackburn is rather proud in questioning the patriotism of Colonel Vindman, who crossed over to our country when he was a child, grew up with the American dream, went into our military, and got wounded and received the Purple Heart, servicing our country, but somehow he's not patriotic because he felt he needed to do his duty for his country over the desires of the president. So, yeah, I've been getting more and more irritated in how this process is going about. I was somewhat encouraged on Wednesday when the Republicans had their all-day powwow in Mitch McConnell trying to whip up the support to get enough votes to eliminate the possibility of testimony. And he had to admit at the end of the day he couldn't do it, that he didn't have enough votes. Now the situation is that maybe by Friday he will. As of yesterday, in polling, in many polling, but one specific, 82% of all Americans wants testimony. 70% of Republicans want testimony. These are extraordinary numbers. Major majorities of this country want there to be testimony. And I would dare say that even those Republicans who want testimony probably still believe that the president is not doing anything wrong with what he did, but they want to see a fair process. And, if I was an actual Trump fan, I'd probably want to see testimony too. And the reason why I would want to see testimony because I would want to make sure that my guy that I was supporting was innocent and his actions was above board, and the evidence would show that. Because what they would have, whatever how thought-provoking it would be, we would like to see if it actually measured up to what they believe is impeachable offense. But you're not getting that. You're not getting that. These senators want to get offended at what they're doing is being called a cover-up, then vote for testimony. Make it a fair trial, even if it's just for appearance sake. I mean, the President of the United States, according to the testimonies, according to the evidence presented through the House, through our testimony of Gordon Sondland, they wanted Ukraine to announce an investigation. They went so far to say you don't actually have to investigate, just announce it. And there wouldn't have been no whistleblower. You would have seen President Zelensky go on CNN to not only talk about his inauguration, newly sworn as president, but he was going to announce an investigation into Hunter Biden and Burisma. But that didn't happen. And the aid that was withheld for 55 days went through because they got caught. I cannot emphasize this anymore. They got caught. Now, if you've been watching any of this, the first couple days of this impeachment in the Senate, yeah, it's freaking boring. Because what you have is hours and hours and hours and hours of each of these days of the House managers or the president's defenders coming up and pretty much one after one pretty much saying the same thing from their point of view, from their side, one side or the other. The more interesting one is the last few days we've been having Senate questions that are posed to the House managers and to the Trump defenders. That's actually the more interesting part, and because you get the back and forth where the questions are asked and then you get the answers or whatever. So that actually is kind of cool. But what you do see is how the Trump defenders and some of these senators who are now going on and doing interviews where they're kind of echoing what the defenders are saying, they are once again moving the goalpost. Where it once was the president didn't do that. The president didn't do that. That's not what it says in the transcripts. He didn't do that. That's not what that was. That was no quid pro quo. Now, it is, well, yeah, you could have done that. Yeah, that could have been a quid pro quo. Yeah, he could have been like leveraging aid to get foreign assistance to investigate a political rival. So what? See, there we get to that. That is not impeachable. It's not an impeachable offense. Alan Dershowitz goes up there, and let's paraphrase it. He says, "Abuse of power. You can't abuse power. What? Abuse of power is not an impeachable offense? Really?" That I mean, the galling one, which was that even if all the evidence, even if all the accusations were true, that's still not impeachable. That even if it's true, and it's true, that even if it's true that he leveraged aid to get a foreign power to investigate a political rival for the sake of his own re-election, that it's not impeachable because his re-election serves the public good. It serves the public interest. We can go round and round and how god awful that is. What an awful precedent that sets for our country. To suggest that a president can use foreign power to investigate a political rival in an election year, he's able to do that. That's not impeachable because he's doing that to get reelected, and reelection is in the public's best interest. What a green light that gives to any president, Republican or Democrat, to essentially do whatever they want. As Donald Trump says, Article 2 gives him the ability to do whatever he wants. No. But of course, he understands these things as a child would understand these things. So, not only that you don't have a fair trial, Republicans, that you could still show some semblance of fairness because the cameras are rolling. The world is watching you. Your voters are watching you. Sure, your Trump base might be thrilled that you are sacrificing your own personal honor, you're defacing your own personal values. You're falling down on your swords to defend your patron. But there are other Republicans out there. The other Republicans who are not so keen on the behavior of this president, that they only hold their nose and voted for him because they disliked Hillary Clinton, and they hoped that at least this president, in his inability and his inexperience, would listen to others who were greatly minded in politics, that he would rubber stamp political policies that you agree with. And that's true. You got 2 Supreme Court justices out of it, right? You had a tax cut, right? See, these are things that you were wanting anyway, and you didn't care who was going to provide it. However, you make that Faustian deal, and you're getting your bennies off a guy who goes on Twitter rants like he's like a high school girl. not to disrespect high school girls, but you know where the stereotype is going with this, where you got somebody who who makes fun of the concept of being presidential without, to get his rally folk to laugh without understanding there's a reason and nuance to do so. Because when you're president, your words matter, even when you're joking. Now, in the last video, I offered my humble advice to Republicans to vote for witnesses and to try to reinforce the image of fairness. Given so few people actually watch this, and I'm barely a blip on the YouTube scene, I wasn't actually expecting anyone to actually watch this, but I just wanted it out in the ether that, for your own sake. Now that you are going to most likely vote in enough numbers to deny testimony, deny new evidence, which allows the vote to acquit to happen tomorrow, that you are standing there or sitting there in the Senate House listening to Trump defenders give half-ass, inane defenses to this president, claiming that abuses of power and obstruction of Congress are not impeachable. That a president is allowed to abuse his power, to get monarch levels of power, that once acquittal happens, who knows what's going to come after it, because this green light is given to him. He is not a careful person. He doesn't know when to shut the fuck up, even when it's to his best interest to shut the fuck up. I've given you advice last time. Obviously you didn't hear it or see it, but I gave it. So I will now give advice to the Democrats, who will most likely not see this. The Democrats, DNC, liberal think tanks, always look on the bright side of life. Look at the perspective of this impeachment. You know how it was going to turn out. There is a political calculation here that I'm certain some of you have already picked up. When the verdict happens, take the hit, go to the cloakroom, say, God damn it, and then go to work. Go to work. Every Democrat that is challenging a Senate or congressman in the Republican Party should have on call talking points, video, and your spin, and your correct spin, that these members of the Republican Party were covering up for a president that chose this president in their own personal paranoid grip of power over the country. The country that in its majority wanted witnesses and testimony and evidence being put in. It's time for the attack ads to start rolling. And I'm sure in the bowels of the DNC or in these think tank groups, there are already people putting some video clips together, doing some edits, getting some nice little music cues going in there, because the attack ads were certainly already going on Joe Biden. Turning the Senate impeachment into a referendum on Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and Burisma because they couldn't get it out of Ukraine, so they may as well take the time to use it in the Senate. Yeah, that's another thing. This has nothing to do with the Bidens. This is about a president under impeachment But, let's take that opportunity because in reality, they were going to acquit him anyway. That even in a fair trial atmosphere, these defenders could stand up there and recite green eggs and ham, and they could give you the South Park Chewbacca defense, and it wouldn't matter because we know what the verdict is going to be. So, Democrats, take no prisoners, eat the wounded, run the attack ads on every one of these Republicans who are so defiant and so eager to not have a fair process, so ready to give up what they have previously said in years gone by in order to placate their childlike president. Make them work to keep their seats. And from the lowliest unnamed senator who only known by his constituents, but otherwise not someone the media talks about too much, all the way up to the top, you have opportunities here. You have opportunities to control the narrative to the majority of Americans who are seeing this process as being unfair, that regardless of them voting for Trump or not, who are going, God damn it, at least be fair. It's to your best interest to be fair. It's actually the best interest to the president to be fair. Because if he's fairly acquitted, then that's more power to him and to you, Republicans, to say that, well, we gave them the fair shot. We were above board on all this, instead of this bullshit of saying, well, all these subpoenas were invalid because we say so. No court ever said any of these impeachment subpoenas were invalid from the House. Or claiming that, well, since the House didn't call them, why should we call them? They didn't call them. Because they were defying subpoenas to testify, they were refusing to testify. That's another one of these things that pisses me off when you see these Republicans who claim they have no evidence, but then denies new evidence. They don't have any evidence, but we don't want them to have evidence. We don't want to hear about new evidence. We don't want to hear testimony, even though there's testimony. They complain about there was no first-hand witnesses that testified. John Bolton, Mick Mulvaney, Rick Perry, Mikey Pompeo, Rudy Giuliani, even though I don't think either side wants Rudy Giuliani to really testify, but he's one of these people, But on Lev Parnas, you can disparage him because he's under indictment. He's wearing a freaking ankle monitor. You can try to trash him all you want, and there's a lot of room to trash him. However, he also brings documentation and evidence. He brings text message evidence. He brings emails. He brings audio. He brings video. And you don't want to hear none of that. John Bolton brings out an excerpt from his book and a few clips of what he has said about this whole situation being a drug deal and Giuliani was a hand grenade. Some of you Republicans were wanting to hear from him, and you're trying to squash that for some reason. I don't know how the spin works with John Bolton, but for those of you who are not savvy in politics, John Bolton is no fucking liberal in the least. People are coming up on social media and posting videos of like what Adam Schiff was talking about John Bolton in 2005, and how he wasn't very trustworthy or this and that. Well, no shit. Do you know who John Bolton was and is? For the sake of politics, people will say that on either side all the time. But John Bolton is a staunch warhawk conservative. John Bolton was gung-ho in the Iraq War. John Bolton was rational in the UN. I think he threw a stapler at a secretary, I think. Something that Amy Klobuchar was also accused of. Then you told me about that. And I remember Amy going, yeah, well, I'm a tough boss. She didn't deny it, which I kind of like out of Amy. But John Bolton was eager to get in and go into war with Iran. This is not a liberal savior. And in fact, I'm kind of curious in you all not wanting him to testify because there was every indication that he could simply say that he disagreed with the act with how this went about, but he wasn't opposing it. We don't really know what he would testify. I mean, this is why it's a gamble to put all the eggs in Bolton basket. But be that as it may, he has first-hand information that if you wanted to have a fair trial, if you wanted to have the appearance of fairness, you would want to hear it, and your leadership does not want you to have any witnesses. What does that say to the American people that you want to protect the president so much that you will go down in the first impeachment to not have witnesses, to not have testimony? That is not about the will of the people, since the majority of the people, including 70% of Republicans, want to see witnesses and testimony. So Democrats, if I, a grunt retail worker with some college experience, can come up with this, you political scientists in your think tanks at the DNC should be already doing this. Make every Republican wear their impeachment involvement as a lodestone. Make them the appearance of being in bed with Donald Trump to get foreign power to investigate a political rival. Tie them to Trump on this, that they are okay with it, that they are absolutely A-okay with using foreign power to go after a political rival. If it's not okay for Hillary Clinton or her campaign to pick up the Fusion GPS dossier that was originally created for Republicans, even though she did not use it. But if it's still not okay for her to have that, then it's not okay for President Trump to try to pressure President Zelensky to investigate Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and Burisma in exchange for aid, for the military and financial aid to keep his country afloat. That while they were waiting for that aid, 13 Ukrainian soldiers died in fighting with Russians that may have not had necessarily needed to die had the aid been there, had the Javelin missiles been there. Because the defenders want to tout how President Trump is so tough on Russia, and President Trump did more than Obama, that he was giving out Javelin missiles when Obama was not. Oh, well, why wasn't he giving them out 55 days later? Alan Dershowitz is saying that it doesn't matter. It's not impeachable. For him to use a foreign power to investigate a political rival, it's in the public interest, so he's not doing anything wrong. That he can't abuse his power. Is the president omnipotent? Is he levitating over all of us? And Democrats, if you're worried upon that people are going to forget about the impeachment, You're worried about people going to stop being angry about it, that they're going to, like, shrug their shoulders and just say it was a democratic ploy. No, 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 no. Take heart that that's not really going to happen, because you know what? President Trump is going to keep running his fucking mouth. And he's going to bring it up at every opportunity. He's going to brag about it. As he bragged about, he has all the documents and they have none. He brags about withholding evidence. He'll brag and he'll thank the Republicans for not having a fair trial. The Republicans, in their calculations, they want to kill this quickly because they want to move on. They want to be quiet about it. Maybe some of them who feel the need to pander to keep their Trump base voting bloc to keep them in office. But the rest of them, the majority of them, they want this over and done with because they don't want to be involved with it. Oh. Okay. Pardon, we have a cat interference. But they wanted to be nice and quiet, so they can move on to the other things, to whatever little benefit they get out of being sycophants for this president. But the president's not going to let him, because the president's going to run his mouth. Take what he says, use what he says against him, use it against the Republicans who are protecting him. You. Hi, man. Out of foreign cat interference. So use it. Make every attack ad on how the Republicans are protecting this country, protecting this president over the well-being and the honor of this country. You know, it may not look like it right now, but I'll tell you, by November, if you get this going nice and strong, you point out the hypocrisy here. You point out everything that was done in protection of this president, from the Senate, from the House, from the lies of saying that Republicans were being shut out when they were not being shut out in the process, with them going to the skiff and putting that little fucking display when 40 Republicans were on 3 committees on the impeachment that were allowed to ask questions, that were allowed to call their own witnesses, that were allowed to be in the fucking room, and they chose not to be because they wanted to have the visual of them, oh, we're not involved. Where the president can claim that, well, there was no due process for me. There was no due process with me. They didn't want me involved in it. That he was allowed to be involved and he chose not to. And those same lies, they echo through the Trump defenders in this process. Flat out lies. Because it doesn't matter for them to lie. Like I said, they could read green eggs and ham, and it doesn't matter because the verdict was going to be the same. But at least for the appearance of fairness, you could have been a little less gleeful about it. It annoys me when the media, tries to build up these moderate Republicans, where it's like, oh, what will Susan Collins do? What will Lisa Murkowski do? What will Mitt Romney do? What will Lamar Alexander do? Or anyone else? And, time and time again, they turn around and they become wet noodles. That is what is suspected to happen tomorrow. The Democrats only need 4 Republicans to cross the line. And they are being confident that they're not going to get 4 Republicans to cross the line. that it's kind of hazy that 3 would cross the line. And even if 3 crossed the line, you know, in basic math, 3 out of 53 is 50. 3 plus 47 is 50. And then you have a tie. Theoretically, the Chief Justice would be the tiebreaker. But we don't even know if Justice Roberts is going to do that. It could be just like 50-50, and then if 50-50 you lose, because we're not going to be a tiebreaker. And since it doesn't pass, then you're not going to get witnesses, and there you go. So once again, all these people that you have media waiting outside their offices to find an inkling or a hint of how they're going to vote will once again be a wasted effort, and giving exposure to people who, who try to talk a game of moderation, of wanting to compromise and wanting to be fair, and it turns out they'll just get rolled like they always get rolled. So Democrats, run with this. Do not get demoralized. Democratic voters, do not, lose yourself in apathy that, it doesn't matter. There were kids under 30 who were wanting him removed. These are the young voters, the newly registered voters. They're banking on your short attention span. That, you're angry now, but the next shiny object that goes by, you'll forget about all this. And I'm not just talking about youngins. I'm talking about everybody, because this type of politics of this day and age and it's not just about Trump, but this type of politics, and it could be on both sides, they expect you to have short attention spans. They obviously don't think that everyone is as politically wonky as I am that be paying attention to this as I do. But if you are, they're in a lot of trouble if you maintain your anger at this hypocrisy, that you remember how they covered up for this president, that they did not have a fair process. You remember how they chose this president over party and over yourselves. That everything that is touted as great and strong and powerful that this president always adds in his adjectives on anything that he does, including a border wall, they fall over with a gust of wind, as we saw in the border wall piece in California. Newly installed slats into the border wall. Only the best material, only the best people gets hired, and nice Santa Ana wind knocks that shit over. It is a perfect metaphor for this president. No matter how he builds himself up, how much his actions he builds up, in the reality, when you actually look at it, the inflated gets deflated. The cold, factual reality that they don't want to talk about, they don't want you to pay attention to, because they want you to pay attention to the flailing hands and the entertainment and the grandiose words and the macho bullshit, because the reality is always substandard. He is nothing more than a slumlord, superintendent, a landlord that goes and gets a call that the pipes are busting in someone's apartment, and they walk over there and they just put duct tape on it and some bubble gum and then walk away. with apathy. Skim on materials. Why not? Why not? Because I mentioned this. I don't even think I even mentioned this in one of my YouTube videos, but I did mention this. Doesn't this sound like the result? This wall knocking down, the result of maybe the money that was allocated. I can't even say words. Allocated for border security that was given last year. It was given in 2018. The money that was given to reinforce these structures and to add security and so forth. This sum of money, this chunk of change, only 6% was actually used, and the rest of the money was socked away. What if this whole border wall bullshit is just another money-making scheme? But I digress. Alright, I'm gonna try not to make this as long as my normal ones, but you know, there is no limitations on impeachment. If the president does wrong things that are suspect, that are worth investigations, and you try to impeach him, but it doesn't go through, well, first of all, he's still impeached for the rest of his life. That don't matter. But there's no statute of limitations of that you can't impeach them again. That you can look at his activities and his actions. That he does after this, because every time it seems that he gets over a crisis, he just gets more and more bold and he does more shit. So it's just, I mean, hell, this Zelensky call was one day after the Mueller testimony, where he thought he was in the clear because Mueller could not indict him because of the DOJ memo, even though he had 10 instances of obstruction of justice. But since Mueller was bad on television, and he felt he could freely go and pressure Zelensky to, oh, by the way, we'd like you to do us a favor, though. Both of those calls for Zelensky, we never heard the word corruption. Isn't that kind of interesting? Okay. Democrats, don't lose the opportunity here. Take the hit. We're going to get hit. Take it. Get up. Go to work. You know, not the best analogy or metaphor, but during the Civil War, when General Grant at the time took over the Army of the Potomac, and he started his trek south into Virginia, General Lee's Confederate Army met him at Spotsylvania, near the battlefield of the Wilderness that happened the year before. They're in Chancellorsville. Lee defeated Grant at Spotsylvania soundly. Now, before Grant, every time a Union army met defeat, they either retreated back to the Potomac if they were too far, if they were too close to DC and they just returned that way, or they crossed the Rappahannock River, like say during Fredericksburg. They went backwards, essentially, is my point. General Grant took this defeat, felt bad about taking this defeat. He actually was reported crying upon the news of the casualties of what his army suffered in this defeat. But you know what he did? General Grant did not go backwards. In defeat, he went forward. He pushed his army forward even after they were defeated. The Army of Potomac never experienced this. They usually would feel that demoralizing. They would feel that being demoralized, and in defeat, they would feel like, oh, we have to go backwards, and we'll probably have to wait for another general to show up because this general will probably get fired because none of them can figure out how to defeat Lee. But no, General Grant went forward. And Democrats were going to take a hit in this impeachment. He's going to get acquitted. He should get acquitted during a fair trial, but nonetheless, he's going to get acquitted. We knew that was coming. We're going to hear the grandstanding. We're going to hear the victory lap. He's going to have a big Oval Office party. There's going to be something at the Rose Garden. They're already discussing how the plans are going to be for this victory. Take the hit. Get up. March forward. And keep marching forward. That's all I really have tonight. My friends and acquaintances, the Ranter rants because his urge to rant is always rising. And just because you get hit doesn't mean you don't get up. And when you get up, be proud to get up. Be proud to not go scurrying away to another country like people were saying when Bush got his second term. Oh, I can't stay here. I'm going to go to Canada. No, you stay in the trenches and you fight for your country. You fight for the political processes of your belief, of what you think is right or wrong. You do not concede away your values, like the Republicans conceded their values away to protect their president. You don't give up. Yet you pick yourself off the ground, you wipe the blood from your nose, and then you smile, and it'll be my turn. Make it our turn in November. Y'all have a good night.